ICU. I'm probably not the one to tell you about this. I wasn't really there. I think I remember standing in that little strip of gravel that runs between the asphalt of a highway to whatever borders it. In this case, it was grass and shrubs, then a fence, then a mountain range. That is what I was looking at, I think, way off in the distance. But in my memory, I was standing some 20 feet off in the same strip of gravel, looking at myself. I looked like I was about to take a long walk or fall down. I was out of it for a long time. I was pretty busy, going places, not real places, somewhere else. The first thing I remember, I guess, is not being able to move, blinding pain, and being higher than hell. A guy was there talking to me, but looking out the window. He was crying. I found out he was the anesthesiologist that couldn't put me under for fear I wouldn't wake up. Appears it was his job to hold me down while they opened my skull with a jigsaw. I was machined with a little wilted human attached, humming and whooshing beeps and electric crackle. It was pretty quiet otherwise. The sizzle of the fluorescent light, somebody coming by to flip a switch, take a reading, swab my arm, and pull a blood sample. They didn't seem to realize I didn't know where I was. The left side of my body appeared paralyzed. I had blood in what was left of my hair and some dribbling out of my ears. A hand-sized piece of my skull was missing. I was dangerously underweight. I didn't know if I was an orphan, and I kept excreting great bubbles of bowel and blood. They didn't seem to notice, and I didn't seem to care. I was not afraid. It was unusual, curious. I suppose I should have been terrified. You have to know I was on Demerol and Dilaudid, and they kept giving me spinal taps, so I imagine I had some locals too. Any one of those medications has a tendency to dim the seeming importance of things. I'll admit it was unusual. If I felt my head, there is a space with just skin over a warm jello. This is my brain, I figured, curious. I would look over at my left hand and say, "Move, hand," and the hand would not move. I would say, "Bend, left leg," and that wouldn't budge either. I could see my limbs and sense my limbs, and I would talk to them no different than I ever had, and they wouldn't do a thing. Unusual, and maybe a little scary. I never saw it, but I guess I had a plastic gasket of some sort stuck in my neck. It made me nervous, so I didn't monkey with it too much, but from the sound it made when they screwed something onto it, I thought it was blue. And the things they would do with it. They'd hook up some air compressor operation to a potion and start pumping fog into my lungs. That was tolerable. But then they'd go chasing after it with a tube and a vacuum right into my gullet. I'd cough. I'd gag. That hose would grab hold of some hawker and gurgle and make noises like you can imagine. I'd make the other kind of noises. My eyes would bulge. My chest would swell and crush. I'd get nosebleeds. I'd cry. I didn't say anything for a long time. I thought I could walk. It seems silly now. It must have been a Dilaudid delusion. Anyhow, I was sick of shitting on the sheets, so I headed for the can. I pulled out all those tubes. I even got my leg out of traction. Needless to say, I crumpled the instant my foot touched the floor. By the time my head hit, I realized I hadn't yanked my catheter. So there I was, naked, skinny, bleeding, out of range of the call button, mute, with my penis stretched about 12 inches beyond normal, staring up the ceiling, hoping for it to fall on me. I went ahead and let it go. The dead often soil themselves. It is the ultimate relaxation. I was spread-eagled, covered in diarrhea, blood, vomit, resignation, when I felt these hands. Hands that were warm, strong, soothing, saying, Eli, Eli, cleaning me up and running these straps over me and tight against the bed. I wanted my mom and dad there, and I wanted to let them know that I didn't want to be tied down. But all I could do was cry. I told my mouth to talk. I told my body to struggle, but all I did was cry. I wanted my parents to cry too. Well, they'd had it with me. They made a man-sized crib out of a couple of mattresses and padded partition walls. That's where I was tossed. There was a gate where nurses, orderlies, therapists, doctors, whoever, would come through to cuss, suction, dump, wipe, tickle, probe, and feed me. They'd run this hose up my nose and were squeezing in what seemed like gallons of buttermilk to my belly. That was so I wouldn't eat myself. One day, my doctor comes galloping in as I'm lying over against a wall on my side, trying to hold it together. The bedside brain surgeon comes over to set me up, but his foot is on my milk tube, and as he pulls me up, it stretches tight, noodling out of my innards in a straight line from my nose to the mattress. Man, Doc got a kick out of that. He said it looked like a robin pulling a worm out of the ground. I got my act together. I started getting better fast. I stopped passing blood, started to respond to things other than pain, learned to behave. There was no other way out of this. They put me back in bed, started pulling tubes. I now had roommates, a TV, a girlfriend, and a schedule. Everybody gave up thinking I was going to die except me. Dying had never occurred to me. The guy next to me was a riot. He'd managed to shoot off only half his head. He was determined to finish the job and take everybody else with him. He had all kinds of restraints and machines honking and twittering. Anytime someone came near, he'd fly into a rage and send those machines singing. We didn't really get close. Chris and his bike were in a hit and run up in the mountains. We were admitted about the same time. Our injuries were similar, broken up like china cups. We were supposed to sweep up a new identity after the old one had been dashed alongside some highway. We suffered the same tortures. But Chris wouldn't keep up. I moved on by Chris when he was convinced it was 1942 and he was living in his apartment in London. People whispered that Chris was over, that things would never be the same. Chris and I shared something others couldn't. He didn't know where he was going, but I knew where he was coming from. Cindy was a sweetheart, blonde, fair, pliant, with a little gap in her teeth. Her dad was in for a heart attack. I don't remember her not being at my side, just sitting there, waiting for me, watching me. When I looked at her, she lit up like a fresh piece of gum, a real sweetheart. Not much of a talker. I didn't really have much to say either. Usually I was worried about the soup spreading between my legs and whether Cindy could smell it.